Gary's very kindly asked me to look at this incredible passage with you, and we're just going to touch on it today. But it's the end of the series, looking at what it means to be community and grow leaders. And this is the passage Gary chose to finish with. So actually, it would be really great if you had a Bible, you could get it open, because I want to point things out to you. It would be really good if you could see it. So it's not difficult to find. It's right at the end of the Bible, the last 2 chapters, and we're going to be looking at it. But I don't know if whenever you get to this point in the Bible, A, is really complicated, because it's full of unusual images, and B, you feel like you're treading on really special ground when you come to a passage like this. And these 2 chapters at the end of Revelation, and the first 3 chapters of the Bible are the bookends to the whole Bible. And they're so dense with meaning and so important that we grasp what they're saying, because the beginning and the end mark the boundaries of the Bible. And everything in between is necessary to understand. But the beginning and the end, you've got to have this in your mind as we do this. So we're going to look at it. Look, I want you to grasp what we're looking at a little bit this morning, because there's lots of images in this passage. Every single line, every single phrase is loaded with meaning. And some of them that's really difficult to get our heads around. Last year, Joe and I, my wife and I, went down to some friends in Oxford. And we're visiting Roger and Annie. And Roger is this incredible artist. He's just one of the most gifted, talented people I've ever met. And he's a painter, and he paints Bible stories, and it's just, his work hangs in some of the biggest galleries in the world. So he's a proper artist. And we went to his church with him, a little church, little village parish church in Iffley, which is just south of Oxford. And at the end of the service, he just turned to me and said, "Can I show you a stained glass window I did?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I've never done a stained glass window before. I usually do paintings, but the church asked me to do a stained glass window. And here it is." And I know you can't see it very clearly at the moment, but I want you to look at it. And you can see the setting. It's one of the oldest churches in the country. It's beautiful. But here's the stained glass window that Roger produced. And I've got another picture where I've zoomed in a little bit more, because I want you to take a look at it. I want you to, can we have the next photo? I want you to tell me what you see. What can you actually see in that window? Jesus on a cross, or a little bit more carefully. Jesus is there. It looks like he's on the cross, but what is it? It is the crucifixion, but look more carefully. He's in a tree. He's in a tree. Roger's done this really specifically. Can you see the tree? You have to look quite carefully because it's very blue. But the trunk of the tree is at the bottom, and the flowers are on the tree, and you've got Jesus in the middle of it. What's coming out from the bottom of the tree? A river. And if you look really carefully at the bottom of the tree, there's some sheep. And this is the picture that Roger did for the stained glass window in this church. And it's loaded with imagery. What do you think Roger's trying to get across in this image? What do you think he's trying to get us to see and think about? There's a tree of life. Jesus is there right in the middle of it, but it looks like he's crucified. And through this image, Roger's trying to get us to see that the tree of life is where the water of life flows from, but it's all centered on the crucifixion, on Jesus. And the sheep are there because he's in Iffley and it's in the countryside and he likes sheep. But it's an amazingly packed image where he's using his understanding of that bit at the end of Revelation. We heard about the tree of life in that reading. verses 1 and 2 of chapter 22. And we heard about the Lamb on the throne. It's all about what Jesus did for us on the cross. And Roger's taking that and he's turned it into a stained glass window to try and convey that. Now, just to finish this illustration, he put that window, or that window was put right at the front of the entrance to the church. And right below where the river comes out in that window, what do you think there is? The font. There's a picture of it. There's the font. And what's on top of it? A dove and the leaves for the healing of the nation. Do you see what Roger's doing? He's trying to get over this incredible picture of the God of Revelation through art, through images, through pictures. And the font is there because that's where people get baptized, that's where the new life comes from. And what Roger's doing is he's trying to use images, pictures, to get an incredibly powerful message over to us. And that's what the book of Revelation is doing. It's using images, sometimes really strange images, to get an incredibly powerful message across to us. So let me give you an example because when we heard this passage read, there were some really strange things in there, weren't there? And if you've read the book of Revelation, there's some really strange images. But they're trying to get a message across to us. So, have a Bible open and look at chapter 21. And we see that what's described for us in verse 9 is a city and a bride. There's a bride there, the wife of the Lamb. And then the city gets described, the city where the community is. It gets described for us. And I love this bit, down in verse 16. There's an angel, and the angel gets his measuring tape out. He gets a measuring rod out. And you start to get the measurement of this city, which is heaven. You start to get the measurement. And if you look at verse 16, you get a very specific measurement. What shape is it? Square, or look a little bit more carefully. It's not just square, it's a cube. It's a cube. And it's 12,000 stadia long, which is about 1,600 miles. So it's a big city. It's a really big city, and it's cube-shaped. Now that's a bit strange, isn't it? Why? If you try to visualize this city, it's 1,600 miles long, 1,600 miles wide, and 1,600 miles high, and it's cube-shaped. Isn't that a very strange image? So what are we seeing here? What are we actually being described here? And this is why it's really important to understand what Revelation's doing. Revelation's trying to give us something much deeper than what we see on the surface. These are all hyperlinks. You know what a hyperlink is? If you're on a web page, you click on it, it takes you to another page. All of these things are hyperlinks into other parts of the Bible. So I'm not suggesting you do it now, but if you go back to 1 Kings chapter 6, you read about the description, the blueprints of the temple. And in that chapter, you hear about the really detailed description of how the temple is meant to be constructed. And the temple is the meeting place of God and his people. It's the place where God will meet. And there's a space in the middle of the temple, right at the heart of the temple, that's called the Holy of Holies. And in 1 Kings 6, verse 20, the dimensions of the Holy of Holies is described. Have a guess what shape it is. It's cubed. So what is John doing in Revelation? John is saying the whole city is the same as that place right at the heart of the temple that's known as the Holy of Holies. He's trying to give us not dimensions, but he's trying to describe to us an experience of what heaven is like. Heaven will be like what you find at the heart of the temple, that meeting place where God and human beings can meet face to face. That's what John's doing in this passage. Does that make sense? Yeah, but that's what Revelation's all about, that there is no temple. Did you hear that in chapter 22? There's no temple because the whole of heaven is that temple. And what John's trying to give us in this vision is that heaven is where you will meet with God face to face without anything in between. And that happened in the Old Testament in the Holy of Holies, but a sacrifice had to come. We'll get to that. And he's trying to give us a picture, a glimpse of just how amazing heaven will be for those who are there. And it's very interesting to understand these things. And I could spend days going through each image with you. But we then also start to lose something really important, that Revelation was written to a Christian church. It was written to Christians in the beginning of the Christian movement. And it was written for a purpose. It was written to Christians who were being persecuted and who were suffering for their faith. And John gives the revelation of what heaven is like so that those that are facing persecution, they're facing difficulties, they're facing pain in their lives, won't be tempted to give up, because here's what's coming. Here is what is coming in the future. And this picture of heaven should change the way that we live now. That's what Revelation's about. When you get a grasp of what is to come, John's saying it should change the very way that we live here and now in Stalybridge. It should change what we hope for. It should change what's important to us. It should change how we live in community and what we share with people. Our lives, our ministry now, should be utterly shaped by this vision of what heaven is like. It was written to Christians who were being persecuted, who were suffering. Much of our ministry, my wife and I's ministry going forwards, will be in countries where to be a Christian will put you in intense persecution. We met with a friend yesterday who works with the growing church in parts of India. And she was saying to us that when they build a new church building, they don't build it, they build it big enough that it can hold more than 500 people. They don't build a smaller one because it will be filled in months when they've built it. The church in parts of India is growing so rapidly. But when a person becomes a Christian over there, they know that they're going to face persecution, and not just a little bit of opposition. They could die for their faith. And in many parts of the world where the church is really, really growing, the opposition is the fiercest. And that's what it was like here in the early part of the church. And that's why John gives this picture of what is coming in Revelation. Because it's the hope that they need so that they won't give up, they won't stop believing, they won't lose hope because of what is coming. So heaven, properly understood, changes the way that we live in the here and now. So just two things from this passage this morning. The first thing is, why does it change how we live here on earth now? And how does it change us? How does it change us so that we can live out our lives now in church community that makes a difference in the world that we live? So why? Why does it change the way we live now? If you look at the start of chapter 21, if you look at verse 2, you see this description of what heaven's like. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down of heaven from God, out of heaven for God. Heaven comes down. I'm going to say that again, because this is really important. Heaven comes down. If you look at the beginning of chapter 22, when it comes down, what does it do? It brings the tree of life, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. When heaven comes down, it brings God's healing to this world. But heaven comes down. The ultimate goal in Scripture is not that we go up to heaven. That will happen, but only until heaven eventually comes down. Did you get that? Because this is really important. Many people have this view that when we die, we go up to heaven and that's the end of the story. No, that's only a part of the story. When we die, we are united with Christ. But the ultimate end of the story is that heaven, God's place, God's presence, God and his presence will come down to this earth again. And when he comes down, he will bring his healing to the whole world. And doesn't our world need that healing this morning? Don't even some of our relationships need that healing? But when we look at the world in which we live in, the brokenness, the pain and the suffering, the leaves of the tree of life are the healing of the nations is a beautiful phrase. And that's what's going to happen. Heaven will come down, and with it will come God's healing. And that's already begun. That's why it makes a difference to how we live now, what our church is about, what our community is about. Because it came down when Jesus Christ came down. Jesus brought his healing, his power, his presence, wherever he went. Think about it. He calmed the storms. He healed the sick. He fed the hungry. Wherever Jesus went, he brought healing into our world. And he's gone back to be with his Father in heaven. But he sent his Spirit so that we will continue that work. You know, there's a famous historian called Tom Holland. And Tom Holland's written a book about 6 or 7 years ago called Dominion. And he was an agnostic, maybe even an atheist. He didn't really believe in God, didn't believe what the Christian message stood for. But he was a brilliant historian. And he wrote this book because he saw the way that Christianity changed the community in which it grew. He really knew the history of the Roman Empire. And he saw the difference that the early church made wherever it went. So here's a quote from him. During one of the times in the 3rd century, there was a massive plague. And he saw that, he said that the Christians were the ones that stayed in Rome when the plague hit. Christians in cities like Rome and Caesarea didn't flee for their lives, but they stayed to care for the sick, to bury the dead. They demonstrated compassion. They provided aid. While others left for the countryside, Christians remained in urban centres, distributing food, caring for the dying, performing burials. And it was that significant factor in Christianity's growth and development that changed society. Roman culture was a really cruel culture to live in. So, for example, it wasn't uncommon for babies to be just discarded in the street. If they didn't want a baby, they just left it out to die, especially girls. And that was normal practice. Nobody batted an eyelid. Rome was built on systematic exploitation. But when Christianity started to take root, when it grew in those early centuries, it changed the whole of society and it shaped Western culture. So the reason we believe in the sanctity of life, the reason we have healthcare, he would argue, grew out of what Christians did. They brought heaven down to earth. Does that make sense? That's what we're called to do, to bring heaven down to Staley Bridge, down to our workplace, down to our relationship with our neighbours. We're meant to see that breakthrough of the healing of the leaves of the nations through our lives. You know, when Jesus prayed, "Thy kingdom come and thy will be done," that's what he's talking about. Heaven coming down to earth now. We still live in a broken world. We still live with broken relationships. But what Jesus has done on the cross is going to change all that ultimately, completely. But it begins now. So that's why we should see change. But secondly, how? How do we see that change actually appear? And I want to give you 3 very, very quick images from this passage. Stay with me on this. These are 3 pictures, okay? First of all, look at verse 2 of chapter 21. "I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband." There's a marriage. There's a picture of a wedding. And right at the beginning of the Bible, we also have a picture of marriage. In chapter 2, when Adam and Eve are brought together, God says they will be united. I love doing weddings. Do you love going to weddings? Do you like doing weddings, Gary? I do. There you go. He's even got the words. No, I absolutely love doing weddings. And they're just such joyful celebrations, usually. And there's one which really stood out in my memory a few years back. Because I always go through the wedding service with couples before they get married. And I plan it with them, plan the music and everything like that. And I ask them what Bible passage they want. And often if they're not really a Christian couple, they don't really know. So I suggest a few. And this one particular couple picked a passage from the end of 1 John. And it's a lovely passage all about God's love. And in 1 John chapter 4, verse 8, if I can find it, you'll know these words. But this is the passage that they wanted at their wedding. 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. It says this. It says, "There's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment, and the one who fears is not made perfect in love." There's no fear in love. That's what they wanted me to preach on at their wedding. I always ask to see the service sheet before they print it out. And I was quite glad I did on this occasion, because they made a typing error. And the passage that we'd chosen was 1 John chapter 4, verse 18, the one I just read. But they didn't really know the Bible, and they dropped the 1 from before John. So they would have had John chapter 4, verse 18 read out at their wedding. Had I not spotted it, we did get the right one. But if they had John chapter 4, verse 18 read out, it might not have worked very well at a wedding. Do you want to know what John chapter 4, verse 18 says? Here you go. John chapter 4, verse 18. At their wedding would have said this. "Sir," Jesus said to her, "the fact is that you've had 5 husbands. And the man you now have is not your husband." Genuine story. Honestly, that really happened. And that's what they would have had read out at their wedding had I not spotted it. That wouldn't have gone well, would it? That's from the woman at the well. There's a marriage picture in heaven. Marriage is about unity. You know, in the beginning of Genesis it says, "And they will leave their father and mother, and they will come together. They will be united, and they'll be one flesh." And that's the picture of of heaven that will be united with God in such a way that his power, his love, his changing work comes into our lives. And that has happened through the Holy Spirit. Have you ever asked yourself, why can't it all go wrong again? You ever thought that? It went wrong in the Garden of Eden. Why can't it all go wrong again in heaven? You ever asked that question? Why can't it go wrong? It's because of what Jesus has done. Jesus has become the human being that will never, ever go against God's will. And we are united with him. There is a human being in heaven that will never sin. And we are united to him. So the first picture is of a unity beyond belief. The second one is this picture of gold and jewels. It's a very strange picture, this, isn't it? There's jewels everywhere. There's gold everywhere. And I don't really have time to show you this, but if you go to Genesis 2, you read the description of the river of life splitting. And wherever the river of life goes, there's abundance, there's life. And in one of those rivers, it passes through a world that's filled with precious jewels, with gold. And John's picking up that image in this picture here. He's trying to take us back to the garden, do you see? That it's beauty beyond description. That in this broken world where we often experience pain, there is a world coming where pain is no more, where that hope is certain. And I don't know about your lives. We've had a very difficult year this year in all sorts of ways, and maybe you have too. And this world is full of pain, it's full of difficulty, it's full of hardship. But to have that vision, that picture of what is coming, changes everything. I noticed someone coming into church this morning that had a Lord of the Rings t-shirt on. And I said to her, I love your t-shirt. I love the Lord of the Rings. It's one of my favourite stories. And I'm going to read to you a little passage from the Lord of the Rings. And it's a bit where Sam, if you don't know the story, Sam's a hobbit, he's a little guy, and he's helping his friend Frodo, who's got a ring, which is very important, get it to a place where it's going to be destroyed. It's a brilliant story. Have you, hands up, who's seen Lord of the Rings? Not enough of you. Right, okay, so the rest of you need to go away and either watch it or read it. J.R.R. Tolkien was an incredibly deep Christian guy. His story is laden with biblical imagery. But there's a bit where Sam, he's really in a bad place. Things look back, things look dark. And this is the text that he puts into the story. So are you sitting comfortably? You've got to be a certain age to remember that. But are you sitting comfortably? Let's listen to this. This is Sam speaking. He says, "There, peeping among the cloud rack, above the dark tor, high up in the mountains, Sam saw a bright star twinkle for a while. The beauty of it smote his heart as he looked up out of the forsaken land, and hope returned to him. For like a shaft, clear and cold, the thought pierced him that in the end the shadow was only a small and a passing thing. There was light and high beauty forever beyond its reach. His song in the tower had been defiant rather than hope, for then he was thinking of himself. Now, for a moment, his own fate, and even his master's, ceased to trouble him. He crawled back into the brambles and laid himself by Frodo's side, and putting away all fear, he cast himself into a deep, untroubled sleep." I love that. Let me ask you a question. And this isn't meant to try to have a go at anyone. Do you sleep well at night? I've got a nodding head here. I think quite a few adults here might say, because we lie awake, don't we? And we worry. I do, so I'm guessing you probably do. There are things in our lives we want to control but are out of control. There are people in our lives where things are happening where we just want to stop them. This is a glimpse of the future, when no matter how dark it is today, there is a world coming where there's no more pain, there's no more sickness, there's no more death, there's no more hurt, there's no more anger. And that hope should be an anchor in our hearts. Finally, and I do mean finally, I've probably gone on way too long, sorry. I just want to give you a final picture. Had you noticed in that reading that whenever it talks about Jesus, it doesn't use the name Jesus, not until the very end. All the way through the passage, how is Jesus named? He is the Lamb. All the way through chapters 21 and 22 is the Lamb. He's the Lamb on the throne. He's the Lamb from which the river of life flows out of. It's the Lamb, the throne of the Lamb. And John is trying to show us something really important, that changes the way we live, that changes our community, because it's all about the Lamb. It's all about Jesus. It's all about the cross. The Lamb, of course, is meant to take us back to the Passover, where God rescued his people out of slavery using the Passover lamb. And that points forward, of course, to the cross, where Jesus died in that window that Roger did. It's all about the gospel. It's all about what Jesus did for us on the cross. It changes our lives here and now. It changes the way we think about death, about suffering in this life. Final story, and then I'm finished. There was an American preacher back in the 1950s, famous preacher called Dr. Barnhouse. And he preached in New York in the 1950s. Sadly, his wife died very suddenly and quite young. Left him devastated, and his young daughter, Margaret, was in grief and shock. She didn't understand what had happened, and she didn't understand why it happened. And Dr. Barnhouse wanted to help her, this young girl, just really understand the hope that we have in Jesus, that death is not the end. And he didn't know how to explain it to her. And then one day they were crossing the street and something happened and gave him an idea. As they were crossing the street, a truck drove past and nearly hit Margaret. And it scared her, and she screamed, and her father picked her up and carried her off. And he said, "Look, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. You're safe." But she was scared. And it came into his mind, he had an idea to explain it to his daughter. He said this, he said, "Margaret, you know how we're sad about Mummy?" And she nodded. "Well, let me ask you this question. Did that truck hit you?" "No," she said. "What did hit you then?" She said, "Just the shadow of the truck." And he said, "Well, that's okay, isn't it? You see, death didn't hit your mum either. Only the shadow of death hit your mum. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Death hit Jesus, but it couldn't hold on to him. He didn't deserve death, and so he rose again. And now all that can hit us is the shadow of death. And that is only our entrance into glory. Do you see? Do you see how it changes everything when we just begin to grasp and get a glimpse? It transforms our lives now. The Holy Spirit unites us with Jesus. We can go out into this world as a new community to bring his healing and his wholeness as a transformed people. Thank you for listening. You've been really patient. God bless you.